I'm Justin Snyder.
And I'm Stephanie Greenwood-Snyder.
We're just an average, everyday couple.
But over the years, we've seen the incredible importance of building community together.
We'll be talking with friends and experts about their stories and experiences to help us learn and grow.
We don't want to just survive through life.
We want to intentionally thrive.
This is The Intentional Thriver. Well, welcome back to The Intentional Thriver, the podcast that we talk about how to not just survive, but to thrive.
That's right.
And today we have our wonderful guests, Hannah and Trevor Chambers. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
of course.
for being on.
Yes,
We're really
indeed.
excited. We always start out of our podcast by saying something that we are thankful for or appreciate about our guests. And something that Justin and I were just talking about today is just how amazing you guys were as our realtors. We were sight unseen, not just this house, but this town, this community, this state, pretty much.
Well, we were kind of originally thinking of another
area, another town.
And Hannah, when we were talking to you, you're like, okay, based on everything that you've described, maybe you want to consider this other place, you know.
You'll get a smaller house for the price,
City.
but it's worth it.
And it's like, just fair warning, it's almost impossible to get a house in this city, but you know, just check it out, you know. And you guys made it happen. You guys did the miracle.
And we made Trevor go to 10 different houses.
Yeah,
knock on the wood, one of the houses, like the structure was falling apart.
Well, some of them were in better condition than others, but no, you guys did an amazing job.
Thank you.
You were an incredible team, I will say, because, and we can talk more about this later when we, talk about being a husband and wife team and that dynamic, but it was pretty terrifying to buy a house sight unseen, but you guys did an amazing job, and we felt very confident going through the process with you. So if people are looking to buy a house in the Atlanta area,
look them up.
Yeah, for sure.
Really anywhere, because we've got a nationwide network. So we can always connect.
Not just Atlanta, people, all over the world.
We were connected from your sister who lives in New Jersey.
Connecticut. Close.
Tomato.
Somewhere out.
Up there.
Happy to always help. Really anywhere.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. My wonderful sister. Shout out. Thank you. Even though we couldn't utilize her as a realtor, she found us.
Yeah. At this point, we have a no family policy on the podcast. Because I have 7 siblings.
You get it started. It's just.
Where do you draw the line? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have nephews and nieces.
Maybe we'll do a season of just family.
I don't
know.
Okay. Awesome. Let's get going. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into real estate. I'm so excited. I love hearing Hannah's story because you were the visionary, right? So tell us about.
She just made it happen.
How this came to be.
Yeah, well, our real estate experience is twofold, both as realtors in terms of sales, but then also in terms of investors and flippers and that type of a thing. So I grew up around people, my dad and my uncles, and everybody was buying rental property, renting it out, doing flips, different stuff like that. There's pictures of me at 6 years old with a shovel in some backyard of God knows where, with gloves on and all this, fully involved. So I just grew up thinking that was normal. And then I definitely went through a stage where I was like, I'm not doing that. In college and in high school, I was like, no, it just seems like so much extra work. It's so complicated. I'm just not doing that. I'm just going to get a job and not think about anything like real estate at all. And then, let's see, I was working at Minneapolis the airport, the air traffic control tower, when the government kept shutting down and all that in what was that, 2009, 10, 11.
Yeah.
So I ended up having all this time on my hands waiting, we would be off for a while and this, that, and the other thing. So I ended up buying my first rental property then. I think I was 21. Wow. And it was a bank-owned property that they had done, a little bit too, and this, that, and the other thing. So I bought that then and rented it out. And then we've just kind of been doing stuff like that since. So, yeah. And then I got licensed in real estate in 2016, right after we moved to Georgia. And since then, I've been, with a few different brokerages and a few different situations, and I've learned a ton. And so I do that, aspect of our whole little situation. And
so you left out some fun parts. I'll fill in.
Oh,
Yeah.
Please give us all the details, Trevor.
Yeah, I was never really into real estate growing up. I would say my first little taste of real estate at all was summers of college. I lived with my aunt and uncle down in the Twin Cities area of Minnesota. And my uncle was sort of a jack of all trades.
Mm.
So he was working on a lot of different properties. And I was getting some exposure to that through him. My brother also bought a property in Minneapolis during one of those summers that he was going to flip. And I was there working on that, helping out as well. So that was sort of my first little, getting my toes wet a little bit within real estate and just kind of understanding that aspect of it. And then it really started to take off once I did meet Hannah. And again, she had the rental property already.
Mm.
And I would talk with her dad a lot about different aspects of real estate. He was really into it. Her whole family very much into it. So we got to learn a lot. At this point in my life, I was actually in software sales, working probably 60 hours a week.
Oh, wow.
Software, getting very burnt out, making good money, but just really living a life where I was overworked and just the stress was kind of getting to the point where not really worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So we all, myself, Hannah, and her dad included, started looking into investing in mobile home parks.
Mm.
And that's really where we all got together as a real estate duo here, I guess, to get our start was in mobile home parks. So we went down to Texas. We went to this boot camp where they taught you all about owning mobile home parks. I cashed out my 401k from selling software and we mobile home park in the Midwest. That was our first property that we owned together. We did that for a while. Had partnerships with some other mobile home parks in the Midwest as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved down here and got into some other rental properties that we can discuss. As for the actual becoming a realtor, that happened when Hannah was pregnant with our second child and she was not necessarily wanting to leave the house as much. And so I was like, well, great, I'll go ahead and get my license and you can send me out in the field and I'll go do the showings and all of that. And that's
smart.
I'll start
all up here.
Beautiful.
It's a lot, like showing houses, in my defense, is a lot, like, not only are you like dressed up and on your feet and everything, but like, to be kind of like upbeat and excited and like, here's the detail and like on top of it and stay, in front of people. It is exhausting. And it's, it was summer and I was hot and I was like, I cannot go show like 5 houses on a Saturday by myself.
So you just doll up Trevor and send him out. I love it.
It's really funny because we would probably, well, not even probably, we come from that perspective in such different ways. I go into this position as like, I just love houses. I love the structure of houses. I love the bones of them. I love like the foundation and like figuring out the inner workings of all these houses.
Mm-hmm.
So people get both aspects of that.
They really do.
It's working with us and it seems to work out well.
Yeah. And I can say from like firsthand experience of that, because that's exactly what we experienced was, Hannah would work with us to basically strategize essentially numbers. Like what do you want? What are your goals within it? What are the area, like a lot of the big picture stuff.
The offer letter,
the
partners,
all of the stuff that we don't even know goes into real estate, and then Trevor did such a fantastic job in like doing the walkthroughs. He would just have like the most random questions, not only for him, but he would also like pick up on the most like detailed things and like, oh man, that baseboard is like this type of material. That's not going to last you very long. It's, like little things like that, that like we really appreciate.
One of my favorites was the master bathroom had like a hole between like the main area and
one of the house. Yes.
And I just remember him looking up and being like, with us on the phone, and he was like, do you really want that?
It's like, that's weird.
No, we're good.
I remember that house. Yeah, that was interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. It's still on the market to this day. No, I'm kidding. So talking more about like being a husband and wife team, like Stephanie and I worked, we have worked together on multiple ventures in our past, and even some currently that we're working on. I mean,
like a podcast.
Like a podcast. There are some really incredibly beautiful parts about being partnered with your spouse. And there are some things that are a little trickier at times. Like, can you guys talk through some of the like joys and struggles, or what that's like, that dynamic of working together as a husband and wife team within that field?
I think the hardest part is with having small children, and our oldest just started kindergarten, but our youngest, we don't have any outside childcare or anything. And so some days it is like we're ships passing in the night. I'm coming home from a meeting, he's walking out the door to go show property or go look at somebody's air conditioner or whatever the case may be. Just making sure one of us is like home with the children all the time. And then it's like, I haven't seen you all day, but we've both been like doing something, with minutes in the house at the same time. I know the most recent investment property that we bought earlier this year, he was literally there all day, every day for, what was it, like 3 weeks? Probably.
Oh, man.
Not like that long in the grand scheme of things. But when you're in it, he's there working all day, but I'm here with both children, Carson in preschool, which is only 3 hours a day, and then still like working and upholding everything. And trying to like do laundry or like buy groceries. It was like bananas. In fact, I think we learned a lot from that experience in terms of probably what not to do next time.
Noted.
Done any big projects like that with small children, and that was really, really, I think, hard on both of us. So I think we've tried the all-in project, and that's not going to be how it goes next time. But now we know.
Lessons
I
learned.
think that working together, it's easy in a sense to be very much in sync with one another on a regular basis. We know, generally speaking, what the schedule is, what each other are going to be doing during X amount of times. But at the same time, there's also challenges within that. When real estate there is no necessarily consistent set schedule, right? Something can change very last minute, where we've got to be extremely flexible in a life that may not provide as much flexibility as we need at times, due to the kids, due to activities, due to each other's activities that we want to be able to do outside. So there is a very fine balancing act that needs to take place on a daily basis. And it really is truly a daily basis that we're going through this. But I think that we do, for the most part, a pretty good job. Yeah, it's mostly logistical. We really honestly don't have conflict in terms of like, oh, I think we should do this, or you think I should do this, and I think we should do this, or whatever. Like, in terms of business decisions, I think we actually do pretty well. It's just like a whole logistical. We have like a color-coded calendar and like all that.
Yeah.
So you guys have really experienced such a shift in the market, right? Over the last 3-4 years, your whole, I bet every year to year has been so different from your experience.
Month almost, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. But what would you say are some common misconceptions of realtors, and has that changed throughout the years? And what are some like commonly things that you hear about, like why someone wouldn't work with a realtor, or their fears of realtors, or things like that?
And I'm sure this could be like a whole podcast in and of itself. Is like just this one question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he mentioned sales earlier, but I think like the reason I got licensed in the first place, and the reason I think a lot of people do it, is to solve problems. Like, I'm kind of the logistic type A, one between the two of us, if, a little bit more so. And you meet somebody that's got a problem. People move for all sorts of reasons, but most of them are problems. They get married, they're moving in together, or they have 2 kids, they are having twins, now they need a bigger house. There was a death in the family, they need a smaller house. Maybe there's a divorce, maybe there's a financial problem that they can't stay in the house that they're in. It's usually there's a problem to solve. People don't move because it's like super fun, especially in this market. So I think that's the most rewarding part of it, is you are, helping somebody that has a problem solve their problem. And then at the end of the day, they are so thankful for you, because they don't have to worry about that 5,000 square foot house anymore now that, their husband's passed away, or, we've heard hundreds and hundreds of stories, literally, of somebody that, was at point A and you helped them get to point B. And that's why you do it, because at the end of the day, there's that person that's so thankful for your help and they don't have that weight on their shoulders anymore, no matter what that is. So I think that is probably the biggest misconception at the same time of realtors, because at the same time, everybody thinks, oh, you just get this license. It's so easy. You can get it on the Groupon for $200, $190, take a little test, and then you make tons and tons and tons of money. And it's just not that way. Number one, I mean, the test is, it's cheap to get a real estate license, but it actually is kind of hard to pass the test. But even after that, obviously there's tons of like different fees involved in that. It's not just like all, take home profit and everything, but it is hard. There are a lot of days that are very, very, very hard. Working with all of these people that have all of these problems, right? Like they're moving for this problematic reason. And that leads to a lot of emotion, and when emotions are high and then something doesn't go quite as planned, you can imagine how that plays out sometimes. So a really big part of it is managing people and then simultaneously managing your own like what's that called? If somebody calls you at dinner time to yell at you and you're trying to just for the first time all day, how do you cope with that? And how do you wake up again and do it the next day? Things like that. So that's like the people part of it. And then like you mentioned, there's the contracts part of it, which is a very, very, very expensive mistake to make if you make a mistake with a contract and something goes wrong. I've seen people that I was very close to in real estate make very, very, very expensive mistakes and have to write out checks for $10,000 to people.
Wow.
Because they made an error that even, we pay for error and omissions insurance, but if you're at fault, they're not going to pay it. So I've seen these things happen, and it just is very eye-opening in terms of how low the bar is to enter into this field, but actually how difficult and how high stakes it is for the clients that you're working with. So I think that's the biggest misconception, is people just think, oh yeah, it's so easy. You roll right in, you get this license, and then you make all this tons and tons of money. I mean, people can do math on commissions, but there's so much more to it than that. And I think it is, especially when you're new, a difficult job, to not make any mistakes and keep it all afloat.
What about for you, Trevor? What are some things that you'd say are misconceptions or misunderstanding within being a realtor or the real estate market, or,
Yeah, I think that what she said was pretty much spot on. And to kind of elaborate off of that, with so many different realtors being at different levels, and there just being a lot of realtors in general, when people are when they're looking to move into a new area, for example, and they don't have a realtor, maybe they'll go on to Facebook and say, moving to the area, looking for somebody. They will get just bombarded with hundreds and hundreds of messages of work with this person. And I think the misconception is that it's almost like a used car sales kind of a gig, where people are going to be really pushy and they're going to really fight and be super aggressive to try to get you to buy a house, get you in something that maybe you necessarily don't even want, just because they're trying to make a buck.
Yeah.
I think that, like, from my perspective, that's so backwards. I mean, there's been a handful of times, with you guys even, I remember, I will go in and I will show a house, and I will say to the people that I'm showing the house to, I cannot in good faith recommend that you buy this house.
Yep.
My job is to sell a house, and I will tell people that I'm showing houses to not to buy the house that we're looking at, because there are too many issues. It doesn't meet the criteria. They might fall in love with one aspect and judges or clouds their judgment of other things that they're not seeing. So I just think that the biggest misconception is that we're just all sharks, and Hannah and I really just honestly care about the people that we're trying to get into these houses, because we've been there and we know what the experience is like.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I remember that house. I remember they had like painted everything, and it looked immaculate, especially on
from
camera.
Like the photos at a distance, everything looked good, but when
you would go in and like touch stuff, and it was like bowing, and that was a
like
really
the baseboard
huge deal.
It was a flipped house that they didn't necessarily know what they were doing, and you can't see craftsmanship and quality necessarily on camera, but in person, it was not great.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a big question right now, you know, buy versus rent, especially with the market, right? And
because I mean, too, like, you know, you're talking about the emotional. I know we've talked about that a couple times. Like, a house is one of, if not the biggest purchase that someone will ever make in their lives. Like, that's a huge decision.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of factors that play into that.
Location, actual house, street, you know, so many. School
neighborhood,
system.
school system. How big is it? Is this like a starter home? Is it a long term? You know, there's so many pieces, and obviously every situation is going to be different.
I saw something on Facebook that made me laugh. You guys will appreciate it. It was like, when I bought my house in 2019, I had no idea this was going to be my lifelong house.
Right. It's like my starter home became my like lifelong home because
they're like the market completely
changed. Right. I mean, I think they say if you're going to stay in the house longer than 2 years, financially, it's better to, because I mean, that's assuming you take out a loan and have closing costs.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to buy than it is to rent. If you're going to stay 6 to 12 months, it's probably better to rent unless you are going to keep the house to rent it out afterwards or something like that. So I think that's what they say the general rule of thumb is.
Okay.
But the problem right now, I'm working with this adorable young first-time home buyer couple that, you know, they're on a budget, just like everybody. They're on a budget. Rates are in the high sixes, blah, blah.
Wow.
And, you know, they just can't find what they want in their budget, in the location, like you mentioned, the school district, et cetera, et cetera. And they're saying, we might just have to rent for a year, you know, and try again next year when we've got more time. And the thing that we're hearing a lot from renters right now is we're going to wait till rates come down.
Yep.
But when rates come down, we're going to have a flood of buyers come into the market because there's all these. The statistic they told us this morning was 35% that pool is going to go up by 35%. So what's that going to do to the prices?
What?
They're going to go up even more. And we're still in our market, in our little micro South Atlanta market, prices are still going up.
Yep.
So the better idea financially, you know, so even if rates go down, say a whole percentage, that could save you a little bit of money. Yes, but you're end up going to pay way, way more for the house.
For the house, yep.
And likely with really, really worse terms, because when there's that much competition, if you can even get accepted something,
man,
you know, give up your firstborn child just to get your offer accepted.
Yep.
So a lot of people, I'm saying, I know the rates, yes, but you're in a better position now to buy than you will be a year from now when they do predict that rates will go back down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also always refinance, or we've got really great options to get even a lower rate right now from the get-go.
Right.
But, you know, once those prices go up, then that's what the prices are. So it's a whole balance.
35%? That is crazy.
A lot more intense than when y'all bought.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just a little bit. And that was pretty intense, too.
That was pretty intense. There was nothing. Because we had looked in 2019 to move, and we could have had anything we wanted, it felt like.
We had bought that.
And then we look, you know, 3 years later, and it's like, whoa, you know? So that's a really good point. I mean, I have multiple friends who are renting right now, waiting for the rates to drop. And that's a really good, I didn't even think about that. Like, just the competition in a couple years. If it goes down.
Cash offers and X amount over asking, and, you know, way.
They always say you marry the house, but you date the rate.
Oh.
You always change your rate. But if you get in the house at the purchase price that you like, then you're locked in there for as long as you want to own the house.
Sure.
But you can always refinance. And even now they have like these 1-0 buy down, it's called, and it doesn't cost very much. So we're actually still able to negotiate those in from the seller pays for it. And it reduces your interest rate by a full % for a whole year.
Yeah.
And then by then, allegedly, the rates will go back down. So there's really no downside to buying now as opposed to next year. If somebody was thinking like this year, next year, the year after.
Interesting.
If you want to buy right now and you can't find something that you want to buy or something that meets your needs, and you end up going to rent, I would be more flexible in terms of where I look for rentals, as opposed to, you know, you want to be like, again, in a specific area for buying a house, but you have to rent. I would expand your area of what you'd be willing to do for that time frame, because even when the home prices for sales have gone up, rent has gone up significantly as well.
That's right.
So if you're able to be flexible in the meantime and look a little bit further out until something maybe comes available, rates drop, whatever. But really, I think the short and true, honest answer to this is if you want to buy a house right now, buy it from us. And if you want to rent a house right now, rent one from us.
Amazing. The whole package.
So we got options.
That's awesome.
Well, speaking of rentals, I do want to talk about that a little bit more about, you guys own multiple rentals. You have done the rental thing or still doing the rental thing.
Do you still have the rental from when you were 21, Hannah?
We sold it like a year or two ago.
Oh, wow.
Do you feel like a part of you was leaving, or were you like, I'm so glad to see this go?
I know. It was such a great house, but even like when we went to visit the Twin Cities, it was like an hour drive from where we would stay. It was just not like in an area we ever were. And I think part of the beauty of like us and rentals is that he does most of like the maintenance and the upkeep and everything. And so it just got to be this whole situation to like hire out everything and logistics to even like if you hire out work to get somebody into the house when you live down here, because we do all the management of everything ourselves.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
I was gonna ask.
So I'm sure this question could be a podcast in and of itself. Like, let us know when you guys are starting your podcast, because, you could talk about so many things on this. Oh my goodness. But specifically within rental properties, like what has that process looked like? I mean, is that something that, I don't know, like everyday people like us and a lot of our listeners, is that like an attainable goal? Is that something people should consider?
Yeah.
Again, like a lot of questions within that, but can you talk a little bit about like your guys' process, what that has been like, is that a smart move for people to try to work toward and make?
I mean, I think it's a smart move. What's nice about it is, obviously being in sales and real estate sales where it kind of goes like this sometimes, it affords some financial stability, having more, having properties that cash flow every month. So that's the most attractive part about it. And I think for most people, that would be the most attractive part about it. But I also know a lot of people that don't do it necessarily for the cash flow, but just, hey, in 30 years, these will all be paid off. Not by me. My renters will have paid them off. And then that could be your retirement, or that could be, something that you would leave for your children if you're older, or, that type of a thing. So I think there are major positives to it. I think what we have that maybe other people don't have is just guts to just do it. Because I do think anybody could probably do it, but you hear all these people, oh, I'm not getting into that. I don't want to deal with tenants,
Right.
And it's not necessarily sunshine and rainbows every single day of the year,
Sure.
but I do think it's worth it.
Yeah, I would say every single person out there can do it. And it's not something that's necessarily difficult to do. I think the biggest hurdle for most people, probably guts is one of them, but then also just the capital to invest in first. There are ways to get that. There are a lot of different ways to get that, and people don't know how to go to find different avenues to get that in order to start. I would say that if anybody wants to start, really take your time in the beginning to educate yourself and really learn about the financial side of things and what's important and what you're looking for in this, and understand how much things cost, and if you have to hire something out, how much it's going to cost, and understand X amount of month you have to budget for unforeseen costs and taxes and utilities and all this stuff. Really just understand the whole process, because there's a lot more involved in just buying a house, making it look pretty, and then putting someone else in there to collect money from.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think ever since COVID too, like the Airbnb, like vacation rental market changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
And like right now there is a ton of demand for long-term rentals in our area. We were talking about that this morning at my meeting as well. Because the films come in and they say, okay, great, you're going to work for the films, you get this stipend. Allegedly, we don't really know about the films like you do, but
not right now. I will say.
Exactly. We heard once somebody said that if you don't use your rent stipend or whatever, that you just basically lose it. Like it's a perk of your package. If you don't use it, it goes away. It's not like you pocket it. So the films come in and everything is basically, rented to them because they're upstanding citizens with good income. I mean, excellent
income.
Then where does that
We're
leave?
not on strike.
550 credit score, barely qualified person who still also needs a rental to live. Especially in this case, the person who doesn't qualify for a mortgage. So it's really, really, really tough to find rentals in our area, in our market right now.
I bet.
I think that's pretty much a nationwide thing, actually, that's going on right now. So
interesting.
that to me is like a more secure investment, a long-term rental, because the demand is so high, especially in our area with like great schools and everything like that, that there will always be demand for a long-term rental. Like when COVID was happening, we thought, oh, okay, we should get a cabin in the North Georgia mountains. So you can set up, like an search for yourself. So I set up a search for like what we would want in like this little cabin. And I thought we could buy a cabin and like Airbnb it out. And man, the price, I get in the emails now, price drop, price drop, price drop. I think everybody was thinking the same thing we did. Now, a lot of them, they're trying to sell them. They bought them, to Airbnb it out. The price was high. Now the market is just infiltrated. If you go on Airbnb, you want to go to the mountains for the weekend, you have so many choices. Anywhere. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So it's a little bit more risky, I think. Whereas, if we've thoroughly vetted a tenant, we're like, okay, they're going to pay like 99% of the, chance they're going to pay.
Yeah.
But do we know if this house would be on Airbnb rented 2 days out of the month, 10 days out of the month, 30 days out of the month? I don't know. You don't really know, but your costs are the same to own it. So it's a little bit more risky for me. But I know people that do really well with it too. So
what are questions that you get asked a lot as people are vetting you, or you even wish people asked you?
Yeah, that's true.
I think this was something when we asked if you guys would be on the podcast. Hannah, your brain was just like, oh my goodness, we need to talk about all these things. They're so important because people don't know what to ask because they have misconceptions or they have fears or they think they know it all. Like, both sides.
Or again, it's just a very emotional time and your brain is focused on so many other things that it's like, man, I don't even know where to begin in this process. I know I need a house, but
So what are your top questions that you're like, everybody should ask their realtor this before signing that they're going to work with them?
Yeah.
So the number one thing, you could vet someone very quickly by asking, how many houses did they sell last year? Could go as far as to divide it up into buy, sell. If somebody takes 12 listings in a year, I would argue that they're definitely not the best choice to represent you as a buyer because it's a very different skill set to be a listing agent versus being a buyer's agent, especially in this market. You have to write a ton of offers in a week. You have to probably lose some, and know what needed to do and learn from that and move on. But if you're a buyer, you need to work with somebody that has worked with a ton of buyers in the last 12 months. And if you want to sell your house, I would ask the same question. How many houses have you sold on the listing side? How many houses have you sold as the representative of the seller in the last year? And you can get a lot of information from that.
Asking like, what is the plan? From the start here, walk me through the plan. What is this process going to look like?
Oh, good.
Day one, we're meeting right now. What are you going to do for me tomorrow? Like, how is this going to start? What are you going to be doing? What can I do to help in this process? And just get a total rundown from that point until closing. What is everything that's going to happen? What can I expect? And just understand. So it's maybe a little bit easier to conceptualize through the process. All right, here's where we are. I know what's going on now. I'm not confused. We're not out of, not necessarily out of order, but things are going to plan. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you understand where you're at and how things are going. I think it eases minds a little bit. And it just makes sure that you're on the same page throughout the entire process.
For sure.
You're right.
Yep. I would say the main thing is don't use an agent just because your neighbor Sally down the street plays poker with her and she thinks she's a great person. She probably is a great person. But you have to interview this person as though they are really in charge of what you said exactly, the biggest purchase of your whole life.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things that can go wrong throughout every step of the way, every step of the contract. And, you just have to really trust that person is the best representative of you.
Yeah.
With a market that's changing so much, like you're saying monthly, daily, and we're in kind of a crazy time when it comes to real estate and market and all that stuff. And that's from
Supply and
someone who is
demand.
not a professional by
Right.
any means
Right.
on that front. Like, how are you able to stay up to date on that stuff, on, you know, the market trends and the changes in real estate and all of that stuff? Because I'm sure there's so many cogs that are obviously out of your guys' control that are part of that machine that's constantly moving. Like, how are you able to keep track of all that?
We keep close relationships with people that are smarter than us. Aspect, right?
Mhm.
So, you know, there are people who do, you know, mortgage lending. I work closely with somebody who's a VA loan expert. We spoke with people this morning that do loans for land specifically, and they come in with all this, you know, so they're really, really studying in terms of like rates and loan programs and things like that. And you can't be everything, you know, you can't be, you have to know the market, you have to know the basics of lending, but then you have to have a really good network of people that you can refer to for the more difficult questions and forecasting and things like that. So I say just keep a good network of really, really good vetted people. There's, you know, excellent closing attorneys in town that you're able to meet, things like that. So if you've got a little bit of a question about what could this be, you've got somebody fantastic to call. That's a really, really big part of it. I've spoken with lenders just a couple of weeks ago, and they're like, if we lock today, you're good at this price. You know, if we don't, then it's going to go up, you know, and then that obviously affects your qualification and your buying power in some cases. So it's a big deal to work with a really good lender and a really good closing attorney.
Yeah.
We find ourselves in social situations a lot with people like this too. So it's easy just to kind of, you know, talk shop, so to speak, when you're sitting around and relaxing, and it's not necessarily a formal learning experience, so to speak, but you are taking a lot of what you're hearing in while you're just sitting around and hanging out. So it's taking advantage of opportunities like that, or the more formal things, like you say, really just surrounding yourself with people who are a lot smarter than you. And it's really easy to find if you are willing to go out and seek people out that know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we do this podcast.
We need to
because
learn.
we always talk to people who are smarter than us, which isn't too hard to find. But
in certain areas.
The main thing is just don't look at the news for any of this information.
Correct. Yeah.
That's good.
Daily basis, it's just too broad. You know, like there are people on the news all the time. I see, the housing market is falling, it's crashing, prices are plummeting. And I'm like, that's weird, because I can look at all of the statistics on Georgia MLS and they are really still going up at a pretty dramatic rate. So, you know, but I get calls daily from people who are interested in buying who say, but I see that rates are coming, or that prices are coming down. So we're just going to go ahead and wait until prices, you know, come down a little further. And I'm like, well, they keep going up. And we had the same phone call 12 months ago and they've gone up 20% since then.
Yeah, I think you're so right about that. Tools, like even just seeing my sister go through in her career, how much she's learned, and she won her last 2 first offers for her clients.
That's a big deal.
That's a huge deal. I'm like,
a big deal.
One of them was a first time home buyer.
That's changing. She changed their lives.
Yes, that's a huge deal. And she learned how to write it, or how to position herself, or how to call the listing agent and say what's really important to them, or how to all these tools that I definitely went that. One of them, she actually listed at the same time as one she knew was going on the market 2 streets down that was a higher price. And she put hers right below, had less offers on it, but much, much, much higher. Came out actually getting more than the house down the road. Anyway, I don't even remember all the details, but it was just things like that where
we saw it on the news.
Yeah. But she wasn't looking at just that one house. She was looking at the trends for that neighborhood, the trends for that town, the personalities, there's so much that just the soft skills and the hard skills that really fall into this job.
It's a lot of people management. It's a lot of analytics. It's a lot of financial knowledge. It's a lot of, watching a lot of HGTV. I'm sure that you guys do.
There's a lot of that. Tons. But then think about those people's experience, right? So because your sister was willing to put in the time and surround herself with the right people, these individuals had incredible experiences, and they're now going to go out, hopefully, and tell other people about it. So now we're going to start compounding these experiences based on you being willing to put in the work and surrounding yourself with the right tools and people.
That's right. Yep.
And it really honestly makes our jobs easier on ourselves when we're more educated, the more educated we are.
Sure.
So, if you go to list somebody's house and I don't know, you kind of feel like you might have the price right, but you don't really know much about the area or anything. You might tell them something. Well, what do we expect? Are there going to be a ton of offers? Is it going to go fast? Is it going to go quick? They're going to ask you all these things. And, if you walk into the same appointment, okay, so the average days on market in your subdivision is 19. The average days on market in your high school district is 17, whatever. They're knowing that we're going to expect for it to go on for a couple of weeks, if that's the average. Just things like that, knowing the really, really niche micro market that their house is in, not the state of Georgia or even in Fayette County or wherever, but even in, a certain subdivision or a certain school district, how fast do those houses go?
Yeah. And I remember you telling us that even within our town, this is a little more desirable. This is some benefits because of the golf cart paths, or this is the older side of town, but it's much quieter and they don't have as much noise pollution. I had never heard of noise and smell pollution before.
We were from Florida. It's just the Wild West.
A little different.
Even the style of a house, like a ranch, a surplus house, you use, completely different information than you would a 2-story or a basement versus no basement. I mean, you really have to be specific in what you're looking for and what you're learning.
That's true. Hills versus flat. I mean, it's all over the place.
Driveways in this town.
Man, this has been so good, guys. So the last question I have is, the name of our podcast is The Intentional Thriver. So asking you guys, like, what does that mean to you in your lives? What does that mean to intentionally thrive?
I think for us, I'm thinking about the day that we both quit our full-time jobs,
that
had benefits and salaries and all that. And we were just like, we're doing it, it's living life on your own terms and just saying, like, he wasn't happy in sales. My job was actually pretty fun, but didn't technically pay that much. And the government kept shutting down, not necessarily ideal either. So, I think just being able to say, hey, this is what we envision for our lives. If we want to, take off, we're going to buy a camper. We're going to take off in our camper for a week and just pull our kindergartner out of school and just go somewhere that we can. And we're allowed the flexibility to go where we want to go and do what we want to do and experience what we want to experience. We want to see all the national parks. We want to do all these things. And being able to set up and structure your life and your children's lives so that you can do what fills your cup up. If your job doesn't have to be what fills your cup up. You just have to have something that pays your bills and allows you flexibility to do what you want to do. And that's really huge for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I would say if you want to know what it means, come and spend a day with us. I mean, we are doing it.
Yeah.
And we didn't sit back and wait for it to happen. On a daily basis, we're making it happen. And that was our plan since day one. We were very conscious about what we wanted out of our lives. And we've been taking steps, and, sometimes we've been stepping backwards with that in order to move forwards. There's always things like that. But I mean, on a daily basis, we are very goal-oriented and very focused in achieving those goals in order to have the life that we want, not the life that's given to us.
That's so good.
So good.
I mean, and just to, for not that it means much from us, but like you guys are intentional thrivers, and that's amazing. And because it's like exactly like you said, Trevor, it's the pairing of those things. Like, it's not just like, oh man, I just want to be someone who thrives in this thing. It's like, cool. What's your plan or strategy to do that? And not only just sit back and strategize that, then Hannah, it's like you're saying, like having the guts to actually pull the trigger and to make that happen.
That's right.
So like putting those things together, I'm sure maybe there's somebody who's just kind of had that ideal life fall in their lap, maybe, but for like the 99.9% of the rest of us, like you have to be both parts of that and go for it and be willing to make mistakes along the way. Not that you guys made any mistakes, but
Never.
you know,
Not yet.
Another podcast. Just
Yeah.